am. What is the purpose of life?
Original documentary series, Lavita. This series will help us understand the value and sanctity of life and how we can attain true freedom.
When you are free of guilt, it is truly the most spectacular freedom you can ever have.
Who determines quality of life? What is the criteria for that? Every life is precious.
We have heard about multiple types of agendas being promoted in today's world, both political and non-political. However, the global anti-life agenda is quite new for some of us. Let's take a close look on what it is all about.
Global anti-life agenda has many parts, but the primary part is the holding down or population suppression of developing countries like India. And the purpose of all of this is outlined in a document called NSSM 200, National Security Study Memorandum 200, or the Kissinger Report, which you can find online.
Why is it that some people promote anti-life agendas? What does one gain from popularizing such an ideology?
Under President Richard Nixon in 1974, and was classified top secret, but it was declassified in 1989. It's a short document of about 80 pages, but it says how the United States is going to do population control by giving billions of dollars to the non-governmental organizations like Population Council and International Planned Parenthood Federation. And why are we holding down the populations of developing countries? Not because we care about the people, not because we care about raising their standard of living. It says right in this document, because we want to get our hands on your natural resources. And so if we hold your populations down, there'll be less people to use their own natural resources, so the United States can continue to steal them from behind your backs. That is the whole idea behind population control and the culture of death.
The framers and promoters of the global anti-life agendas are introducing the ideology to the third world countries in a deceptive manner. They act in the pretext of great benefit to poverty-stricken third world countries.
They didn't want to call it population control. They want to call it population and development, to convince the people that when you only have a few children, then you are going to improve the quality of life. But let us just look at what is happening in the world today. People may be rich in material things, but they are poor, they are impoverished spiritually, which actually what matters, so that they are not contented with all the material things that they have. Because really, when you don't have God in your life, you are not going to be contented with anything, and that's the devil's job, to not let you feel contented.
People in Africa are often confused and wonder why some rich and developed countries really worry about the population growth in their continent.
The global anti-life agenda in the form of population control or population suppression is happening all over sub-Saharan Africa, but especially in countries with large populations like Nigeria, which has 1/6 of the population of Africa, Uganda, Kenya, Malawi, and others. The reason is because Africa has the most natural resources of any continent in the world. And what the United States, Canada, Japan, Australia, and the countries of Europe want to do is have access to the natural resources of Africa. So we don't want as many Africans as there were before. What we want to do is to make large, poor African families into small, poor African families by flooding the continent with abortion, with sterilization and contraception. The whole idea is to keep the number of Africans down so they don't use their own natural resources, and we Americans can get our hands on their natural resources by bribery and by corruption.
We often hear arguments that accuse overpopulation as the major reason for poverty in developing and underdeveloped countries. But in actuality, it reveals that the greatest wealth of an impoverished country is its population.
What's important is we're not discussing what are the systemic reasons why there is great economic problems in the world, why there is great poverty in certain parts of the world when there's prosperity in others. And what we're not getting to is the systemic reasons. And so the issue of contraception, or the use of contraception, or the acceptance of contraception is not the answer to those systemic problems. There are much greater and deeper problems. And so as Emil Hagamu, our director in Western Africa, Eastern Africa often says, we don't need contraception. We don't need abortion. What we need is clean water, good hospitals, good schools. We need a good, sound economic system. What we need is an end to corruption. These are the things that undermine the dignity of the human person.
What are the perpetrators of global life agenda doing? They are in fact giving a wrong message to the people in impoverished countries that the actual cause for their poverty is overpopulation, thereby turning away their focus from the real cause of the problem. This forces people to go for contraceptives and abortions as means to escape poverty.
But again, if we go back to John Paul II, and if we invest in the human person, and we give the human person the resources they need. So, for example, for our audience listening, when you look at the idea, just having clean water expands the lifespan of the human person by 30 years. Access to something that most of us in the modern world take for granted. But there are still parts of the world that do not have access to clean water. And so why are we not working to help our people have what they need, the resources they need? That's what's important.
In Matthew 7:15, the Word of God says, "Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves." As the Bible says, the promoters of anti-life are spreading a message of death in the world on the pretext of peace.
If we look at the sources of the anti-life mentality and the culture of death in the world today, we see that the United Nations has been corrupted. It was founded right after World War II, and originally its mission was noble, to keep peace in the world. But it has become a monstrous $50 billion a year bureaucracy that employs over 1 million people. And now the United Nations is a mighty tool of the culture of death. It pushes abortion all over the world. It promotes homosexuality and euthanasia. Everything that will corrupt a nation's people is being pushed by the United Nations. Because the anti-life people are wise as serpents. What they did is they infiltrated the United Nations, they corrupted it, and they turned it to their own ends. What the United Nations often does is it offers aid to a country, but always with strings attached. So these countries become dependent upon this aid, and they're like puppets.
Most of the countries have already fallen into this anti-life trap, but some have realized that they were being misled.
When I was in Dominica after a hurricane in 2005, most of the buildings there had their roofs torn off, 90%. And the United Nations came and said, "We will give you aid to reconstruct your island, but only if you stop the prayer in the schools." The Anglican Archbishop and the Catholic Archbishop stood shoulder to shoulder and said, "We refuse. We will keep prayer in the school. We will rebuild ourselves." And they did. We see all over Africa that when a disaster happens or a famine occurs, that the United Nations will come in and say, "We will give you food. We will give you medications, we will help you with shelter, but only if you legalize abortion, only if you accept homosexuality." So aid is being used as a massive weapon all around the world by the United Nations.
Supporters of the global anti-life agenda promote the culture of death in deceptive ways, presenting death as an easy route. an easy escape.
Then there are more than 1,000 anti-life non-governmental organizations. Now, as it says in NSSM 200, National Security Study Memorandum 200 of 1974, the United States cannot just give countries like Kenya, like India, a lot of money because they'll be perceived as racist. So what they do is they launder it or they filter it through the big anti-life NGOs, the Population Council, Population Reference Bureau, Population Services International, International Planned Parenthood Federation, Marie Stopes International, Médecins Sans Frontières, many other anti-life organizations. I could go on for half an hour. And these organizations hire local people to peddle the various elements of the culture of death, like abortion, sterilization, and contraception and homosexuality.
If we need to defeat a big army, it is wise to outnumber them and then defeat them. The same strategy is being used by the promoters of anti-life agenda to accomplish their mission.
Contraception is not going to change that. All we're doing is making large families poorer, small families. We have not changed the economic problem. We have not changed their current issues in the ground of good hospitals and good economic systems and good schools. So what changes that is when we promote what is good for the human person and give them the resources they need so that they can prosper, so they can develop good economic systems, and they can develop good ways of contributing to the culture.
It is high time that people understand what their actual strengths are and to protect and prosper these strengths.
What makes these poorer nations such a threat to the modern world is because of their population. And that's what threatens the modern world. What I mean by the modern society is the United States, many parts of Europe. They look at Africa and they look at India and they look at the population and they're frightened to death of that population because they know that so many of the world's natural resources that the Western world wants is in Africa and India and other developed nations. And so by keeping those nations, in their poverty, in their economic dependency, and not giving the resources they need is a way to control those resources. And this is a reality today.
The first scenario of the death culture establishing itself was the acceptance of abortion and euthanasia as common norms of developed countries, which justified to complement their materialistic and self-preoccupied lifestyles. They continue to kill a substantial number of their next generation and look with great trepidation at countries with population growth.
But imagine if Africa and many parts of other parts of the developing world, if they can get rid of that corruption that's within many of their systems, and we can begin to provide those natural resources that the human person needs in order to prosper, then we will see those nations become economic powers and begin to be able to have conversation on the larger scale. And again, this is what frightens many of the developed nations, and that is why they work so much to keep these nations poor and dependent.
If we look at the population of the United States, we can see that the increase in the use of contraceptives and acceptance of abortion and homosexual lifestyles are the leading reasons for the decline in the population growth.
In the United States, we see a phenomenon called urban flight or white flight from the cities. Cities like Detroit have virtually collapsed. Cities like Chicago are losing a lot of people. But you will find almost in every case that liberals are running these cities. And when they run the cities, they're very bad managers. They spend much more money on welfare, on supporting people who don't work, and less money on good teachers, on police, and on repairing the infrastructure. You see the bridges falling apart in cities like Detroit. Sometimes they're closed because they're in danger of collapsing. You see very bad roads in cities like this. And when this happens, the people who have the money will flee from the cities because the environment is so bad. But the people who are poor, whether they be black or white, Hispanic or Asian, are forced to stay in the city, and so the poverty tends to cluster in certain places. In the United States, unlike in Europe, we have an increasing population, but this is due almost exclusively to a large amount of immigration, especially from the South, which in many ways is a very good thing, because the typical white American is getting older and older. Also, the typical black American is getting older and older. So we need new and younger people to come in to be workers and to help pay into the Social Security and tax systems so that we can completely have a good road system, have good educational systems, and so on. So the immigrants get the benefit of all of these good systems, and they also benefit us by paying taxes.
But still, the hope has not diminished. There are a good number of people who are promoting the culture of life wholeheartedly to set an example for others to follow.
Eastern part of Europe. And I'd like to talk a little bit about Belarus, because as I said, I was there in Belarus in the beginning of the year. And what impressed me the most was to see how both the Orthodox and the Latin Rite, the Catholics, are working together in building a culture of life. And it was such a joy to meet those wonderful people who recognize that though there may be differences in understanding of theology and differences in understanding of religion, but that the human person, again, must be defended and the family must be protected. And to see these great communities come together and work together. And in the city of Grando, it was a great experience there. And there, I've been around the world in so many places around the world, and I've never seen this except in the city of Grando. In Grando, they have a pro-life public bus. So I want you to imagine in any city, major city of the world where you live, who's listening to this interview, that imagine one of your public transit buses painted green, filled with pro-life messages all around the bus. Inside the bus are materials for families and people to read about life and family. It's the only place I've ever seen that around the world. And to recognize that it's the pro-life leaders in the city of Grando that achieve that. They have a 3-year contract. And even in Grando and throughout Belarus, you'll see the pro-life message on billboards. You'll see government messages saying, we love your families, we love your children. I met doctors who are saying, help us. We want to protect our children. We don't want to do abortions. We're trying to put an end to the violence of abortion. We want to protect human life. A great example of people working together and not allowing differences to prevent them from what is important, and that's the protection of human life.
It's a great joy for me to endorse Shalom World TV. I was delighted to hear that they were going to be based in Portlaoise in our diocese, in a studio there in the parish, to base their Irish operation. I'm delighted to welcome the Shalom team. They will be invaluable partners for the Meeting of the World Meeting of Families when we host it in Dublin in 2018. And they'll be a marvellous tool to deepen the evangelization and the spreading of the good news around our country. The greatest challenge today for all of us in faith is communication. Communicating the message and doing it well. I thank Shalom for making their contribution to the world of media and their contribution to allowing the good news to be heard to the ends of the earth. May the blessing of Almighty God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit bless all who work in Shalom and all who watch their stations. May St. Bridget accompany you on your journey. May St. Conleth be with you and St. Lazarian stay beside you. Amen.
Shalom World, God's own channel.